it's Galina. Welcome to Thousand Lashes. In this video, we're going to talk about how to make your classic sets appear fuller and much more dense and have more texture. So I'm going to give you guys some tricks on how you can accomplish this. If you haven't already done so, please be sure to subscribe to our channel to see more videos like these in the future. So thank you so much for watching, and let's get into it. How you dip the classic extension into the glue is going to be really important for your retention. Now, I'm going to give you guys a trick. So do not worry if you have a little bit more glue on the actual classic extension. Obviously, the bubbles, when you remove the extension from the glue, there shouldn't be big bubbles on it. But if you have a little bit tiny little bubbles like this, it is not the end of the world, and it can actually help your retention because you're gonna have a sufficient amount of glue. It shouldn't look like this. You should never scoop the extension into the glue. You should technically dip it at a 90-degree angle and remove it slowly. But if there's a little bit of more adhesive, I have found that it helps my retention. You obviously have to be more cautious with stickies, but if you're using a fairly fast setting glue, I have found that working with a micro droplet like this has been helpful for retention. So it's just a little trick that I use. Now, when it comes to clients that have sensitivities to patches, I'm going to show you guys what I do, because this client has fairly sensitive eyes to patches. And so what you do is you basically just apply some breathable tape on the outskirts of the patch, and then what you're going to do when you're applying the patches, you're going to apply basically the tape is going to be the only part that's going to touch the client's lash line rather than the hydrogel in the patches. So if you don't have any micro foam patches or micro foam tape, because that's helpful as well, you can always use this trick, and that tends to really help clients that have very sensitive eyes. Then generally working with inner and outer corners is really hard. I find it's more difficult, so I like to tape up the eyelid upwards towards the eyebrow in order to visualize the layer in the inner and outer corners much easier, so that I can actually see what I'm working with. Another option is using tape, of course, in order to isolate, but that's something that I'm going to show you guys in another video. So I'm applying another layer of tape on to the patches, just because I like to make sure that the fumes are really not going to get into the client's eyes, because this client tends to like to flutter her eyelids. So I really like to make sure to tape everything really well, and so the client is comfortable. Then I technically like to put a little dot in the middle of the eye, just so that I can know how I can separate the eye into two quadrants to make sure that I know exactly where the middle is. And I like to put little dots, which are easy to remove after with a little micro brush. So I like to do that because sometimes it's easy to get really lost and not remember where your numbers go. So if I have a little dot, it's much easier. So for this mapping, we're going to do a cat eye mapping, and I'm putting the little dots just to show where the lengths are going to be. I'm going to do 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 for the inner to middle corner, and then after I'm going to do 10, 11, 12, and then we're going to go back down in lengths to 10 and 9. So now for placement, as I told you guys, the most important part is going to be how you're going to place the extension onto the client's natural lash. In this case, you can see there's a little bit more adhesive, but the client's retention is amazing and there's no stickies. I always make sure that I'm using a really fast setting glue, the velour 0.5 seconds, and I make sure that obviously it works really well. The client's retention is generally like 3 to 4 weeks. So if you have trouble with your retention, that's something to try. And then another thing you really want to make sure is that when you're applying the extension, it's flush onto the client's natural lashes. There shouldn't be any, the extensions shouldn't be kind of coming off from the top or from the side. You can also kind of move the extensions as I just did to make sure that it's not flip-flopping from one side to another. That can generally happen if your humidity is too high or the temperature is a little off, or if you're working with a glue that's really slow for you. In that case, you may need to hold the extension in place a little bit longer, like 2 to 3 seconds, if you're working with, like, let's say a 3-second glue. So essentially, when you're isolating in classic lashes, it's really important to make sure that you're taking care of direction. So as you can tell, I'm making sure that the tips of the extensions are all pointed in the exact same direction in the outer corners. So this set is going to have like a cat eye look, and so it's going to have like a sweeping effect. So the extensions are all going to be kind of directed in the same area. And so when we're going to reach the middle of the eye, the extensions are going to be directed straight, and so that's what's going to give it like that cat eye nice look. This is going, so if you have any trouble with isolation, I'm using a straight tweezer here, our straight isolation tweezer, for the outer corners in the middle of the eye. But if you have any trouble with isolation, you can always use curved tweezer. So like we have a dolphin tweezer, which is really good for beginners if you have trouble with isolating. And another thing you can use is a 45-degree angle tweezer, which is just makes it easier to get in to those inner corners and to see the layers much easier. This client has fairly thick lashes. They're very healthy, so she's an excellent candidate for classic extensions because we can just fill up her extensions. I typically like to fill up 70 to 80% for this particular client because she likes her sets very, very, very natural. She doesn't like it too full. I've tried filling up at 100% and it looks much fuller and much more dramatic, but she really likes a fairly natural look. So that's what we're doing. And then another trick I can give you guys, if you have fairly short lashes but they're still healthy, you can use a smaller diameter on them, like a 0.12 or a 0.10. So that way you can still lash them, but it's going to be healthy for the natural lashes. It's not going to necessarily break them. And the rest of the lashes I'm using 0.15 diameters, and I'm also using some flat lashes in 0.15 as mixing them up with regular lashes. So that just gives it more of a textured look. And I love working with flat lashes because I find they just give a very, very good retention. So it's really important to remember with classic sets, everything is going to be much more visible. So there's not as much room for error. So you really want to make sure that your direction is on point, your isolation is on point, there's no stickies. You want to make sure that the inner corners are finished and done very well, because if your inner corners are not finished, it's going to show right away in a classic set. So I hope you guys found this video helpful. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know. Thank you.